So using a piece of software called Remnote, I was able to essentially create DUOLINGO for grade 12 Matric life sciences. And essentially what that means is I've essentially just created fancy flashcards for the entire Matric curriculum for life sciences. So I'll show you a quick overview of how it works. So for example here, you can see, well, we have paper 1 and we have paper 2, and these are all the modules that we need to cover in paper 1 of life science and all the modules in paper 2. So let's jump into paper 2, DNA, the code of life. This is the first one that I studied. And here you'll see a section on important terminology, and then it goes into cellular structure, cytoplasm, location, composition, function. So a lot of the time with notes, you can just read your notes, but I find that it's quite difficult to memorize things when you're reading. And a good way to actually memorize is to write down your answers, or to essentially test yourself on what the answer will be. And for me at least, and hopefully for you, it'll be very helpful in order for you to study. So from there, let's get started. You can either go to the top right here, inside one of these documents. So let's say I'm inside DNA, the code of life. And you go to the top right here and you go flashcards and you go practice with space repetition. This will just essentially just space out the questions for you. So that's what I always use. You can also go practice all flashcards if you literally just want to do everything, no matter how familiar you are with something. This can be good if you're like, if you haven't studied for a while, you just want to refresh of literally everything in the module. But anyway, you can go there, practice with space repetition, or you can go to the right, the bottom left here. You can select which module you want and then just go to this little practice flashcards button. So I'm just going to click on that. So you can see here, this is in important terminology, and it's saying different names for groups of nucleotides. So this is, for example, the codons. So which nucleotide is associated with codon? This is what this arrow is saying. So codons, they're associated with messenger RNA. So I type that in, I click enter for answer, and okay, it says mRNA, but messenger RNA, it's the same thing. I just didn't bother typing out the entire messenger RNA part. If you're very familiar with this already, like let's say you've been studying DNA for a long time and you already know mRNA, then it gives you options here. It gives you 5 options as to what you want to do with it. So let's say I'd forgotten what the answer was. Then you obviously go forget. And then if you were more familiar with the question and you just know it off by heart, then you go easily recalled. And you can see underneath each of these buttons, they essentially tell you in how much time this question will be asked. So for me, I'm pretty familiar with what codons are, which nucleotides codons are associated with, so I can go easily recalled. And that will essentially ask me the same question in 1 week's time. But if I wasn't so comfortable or so happy with this question, obviously go partially recalled or somewhere in between. And then skip is just that you don't want to answer this question now, it's not important. Skip, it'll ask you again 1 hour, it won't reset, it won't affect the timings of when it will be asked, essentially. So I'm gonna go easily recalled. Another example of a question is right here. So you see this double arrow, it means that the question will be asked both ways. And in this case, it's giving you the definition and it's asking you what is the terminology. So a link between 2 adjacent amino acids, that would be a peptide bond. And then you can click answer. And don't worry too much about if it says you got the answer right or wrong. It's really up to you to determine if you gave the correct answer or not, because this will check for exact spelling and a lot of the time, or the exact way of structuring a sentence, and a lot of the time that isn't very important. So it's just always up to you to look at your answer and compare it to the actual answer was versus your answer, and then you must decide if you did well or not. Here is one more example of how you can use Remnote in order to study. So it will give you an image and it will essentially, I've blocked out some of the labels for what each of these structures are. And then it's up to you to essentially get a piece of paper out and just to write down, even just say it in your head, to name what each structure is. So then all these structures here, click show answer, and then I can compare my answers, let's say DNA, mRNA, nucleus, all that good stuff. Before I forget, there's also one other type of question that will be asked. Essentially, it's a fill the blank question. So you can see here, the zygote then divides by ? To form a human. So these fill in the blank questions are just there to help you memorize a specific word in a larger process, you could say. In this case, obviously, it would be mitosis to form a human. And then again, you can select how satisfied you are with how you memorize that answer. Another cool thing you can do, if you're struggling with a particular topic within a module, but you just don't want to study everything, then you can go into a rem. This is called a rem, and you see these bullet points. So let's say I'm struggling with ribosomes. I really don't know much about ribosomes, but cytoplasm I'm good with, polysomes I'm good as well. Just specifically ribosomes I'm struggling and I really want to study it. So then what you can do is you can click this little bullet point right next to it. That'll essentially just bring you into the ribosome little section here. And then you can go top right, flashcards, practice with spaced repetition, or practice all flashcards. In this case, I'm going to go practice all flashcards. So now it will only ask you questions related to ribosomes. And this applies to basically everything else in the Matric curriculum. You can go in there and you can study that very specifically. So you can use my referral link in order to sign up for Remnote. You can find that at the bottom of the video description. I don't get any money from that. It gives me credits in order to use the premium version of Remnote. So if you want to help me out, you can obviously sign up using that link, but otherwise you can also just go onto the normal website. And then you would obviously go try Remnote for free, and you'd sign up using all your details. Once you've signed up, you can also download Remnote. This is how I prefer to use it, but you can also just use it in a web browser or on your phone. I use it on Windows, so I downloaded the Windows version, but obviously if you have a Mac or anything else, then you can check out those links right here on this page. That's at the top there, downloads, desktop, iOS. So once you've signed up for Remnote, you can go into your settings here. If you signed up using my referral link, you can send a verification email to your own email and verify the address. That will give you, I think, $10 in credit, and also give me $10 in credit just for the premium version of the software if you want to use it for yourself for other subjects, for example. But obviously you don't have to do that. Next up, and this is just personal preference, but I usually like to go into the interface and then go into dark mode. It's just a bit easy on the eyes, but it's obviously up to personal preference what you want to do. So now you can go into the description below and look for the link where I share all the resources that I use in order to study. So for example, here you can see the exam guidelines, and there's also the textbook, or the DBE textbook. Just be sure you can download the teacher's guide, but just be aware that these are two separate textbooks. Most importantly is go into the file called latest Remnote. All these files, by the way, are available for download. So all these past papers, some extra study material, basically everything that I could find that helped me. I just wanted to share that in one single place for everyone. But in any case, you can go to latest Remnote and click on this one. It should be the latest version, and download that. I'll just save it to the desktop for now. Then back in Remnote, you can go import Remnote, go to where you save the file, Remnote export, and then it's just going to import the file for you. So once you've imported that file, you might have seen some of these images might have been blank, but just give it a few minutes and maybe close and open up the software again, and you should have all the images available to you. You might have noticed here on the left, you have a few extras. Study Now is something that I use in case I want to study more than one module at a time. So if you go up here to Flashcards and click on that, you will essentially be asked every single flashcard available, which isn't always ideal. But if you want to study more than one module at a time, for example, let's say I want to study reproduction vertebrates and human reproduction at the same time, I just go to reproduction vertebrates, See, I already have this tag here, but let's take it away for now. So I go reproduction vertebrates and I type in the hash key and again, and then it'll let me add a tag. Then I can type in study now. See, and now it's tagged like that. Then I can go into my second module, human reproduction. Again, on the same line, 2 hash keys, study now, and select. So now both of these modules are tagged with study now. You can obviously do this with more, but it's completely up to you. But just for now, let's say that we just want to study these 2 modules. Then I go into study now and I click on practice flashcards in this folder. And then now you see it's populated with 132 flashcards, and they'll be from human reproduction, as well as reproduction in vertebrates. So that's just a way you can study multiple topics at the same time. Next up are definitions. So we can click into this. And with definitions, this is essentially just a list of all the definitions I've found in the examination guidelines as well as in previous past papers. So it is a bit daunting at first, so I wouldn't recommend you study this on its own. I would recommend you study all the other modules first, become a bit more familiar with some of the definitions, and then you can study this. For me, this is just one place I like to just collect all the definitions because I like to put a little bit extra effort when studying these ones. But it essentially just works in the same way as the previous study now tag. And for some reason, this one can sometimes be bugged. So I would just go there, flashcards, and go practice all flashcards, just so you see it populates with 82 flashcards. Next is PST. This one you can mostly ignore, but it's essentially just processes, structures, and tables. So whenever I found like an important process, I've tagged it with PST. This just reminds me, just go back to it and make sure you go through these big processes. For example, the hormonal control of the menstrual cycle. This is quite a big one, and just keeps on going like that. How DNA replication takes place. Just a collection, essentially. Like definitions was a collection of all the important definitions. PST is just a collection of all the important processes that I found. And then finally, study tips. Study tips, this is one I've put the least amount of effort into making clean, but essentially it's just a few tips and tricks I've noticed while I've been studying. For example, like how to calculate percentage increase. I didn't know how to do that, so I just wrote it down. Maybe I'd recommend just looking through it. Something that's interesting, for example, are the types of graphs. So the histograms, you can just look at these and see what they say. It should help you for your exams a little bit. So in this Google Drive folder, I mentioned earlier the latest Remnote folder, which is obviously very important, but I thought I'd just very quickly go over what's in here and what's important and how you can use it. 2021 exam guidelines, these apply to 2023, and I think they apply up until 2025. Probably just have to double check with your teachers or online if they've updated these guidelines, but for this year, these are what we need to study for the exams. And yeah, I struggled a little bit to find it, so that's why I just put it in here just for ease of access. And just basically just tells you exactly what you need to study, and just so you don't waste time studying things that aren't important. Yeah, so there is the government textbook, which is a very, very well written textbook. I do like studying from it quite a bit. There was an error on page 73, and it's right here in seminal vesicle and prostate gland. Basically the function of the prostate gland and the seminal vesicle, for whatever reason in this textbook, it's switched around. So I've corrected it. This version here is the correct version, because I was very confused looking at past papers and comparing them to my textbook, and yeah, it was just very confusing. So I fixed it, I double checked, and this is the correct function of each one of these structures. So then the teacher's guide. This one is interesting. I don't use it very often, except for answers to the end of topic exercises. So at the end of each module inside the DBE textbook, you get these end of topic exercises, and unfortunately the answers to these exercises aren't in the actual textbook, but the teacher's guide has them. So whenever I was doing checking my answers for the end of topic exercises, I would look for them in the teacher's guide. So that's the one reason why it's here. Grade 11 textbook, also don't use this too much, but if it's there in case you know someone who's in grade 11, or if you just want to look back. I think there was one module on kidneys that I did look back into the grade 11 textbook just for some clarification on some wording, but it is not a big deal. If you use my notes, all the information is there. So it's not essential, but again, it's free for you to use and to download. Then past papers, pretty self-explanatory, 2022 all the way to 2017. Some of these early years I don't have the November exams because they just weren't available, but the 2022 exam, for example, they're all here and available for you to use. Then when it comes to this last section here, latest Remnote, I'll always try to keep this updated. I don't plan on making too many more changes to the files. I only have about 14 days left until my exams begin, so I don't want to be messing around too much with that. But if there's any changes, or if I notice an error, anyone notices an error, just let me know and I'll update it. That way this file should always be the most recent file available. And finally, extra study material. This is just all the extras I could find that I think could be of use to you. So these are the, what are these called? Yeah, these are the self-study guides. They essentially just cover similar work as the actual textbook. They just describe it in a slightly different way and they ask a few more questions. So this is just there. I just always have it on the side when I'm studying, just to have some like a second source to double check that there's no errors, or if there's something that's confusing. Sometimes this document just describes it a bit better, and they're available for all of the modules. And then the Mind the Gap is also, it's in a similar vein, but it's quite a bit older, so some of the information is a bit outdated. So yeah, that's just about everything. My recommendation, if you are self-studying Matric life science like I am, or perhaps you're just struggling a little bit, what I do is I usually watch YouTube videos on the topic. I have a few links in the description of this video that I recommend, some channels that I recommend that you check out. I watch the video on a topic, I read through my textbook a little bit, and then I do these questions, and I kind of just rinse and repeat that process until I figured out a topic, and then I move on. So having said all that, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope that this is something that's useful to you. I spent about the last 4 months making all these notes and using the system in order to help my studying. And for me personally, it's been an immense help, and I just wanted to share that with some people. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask them in the comments, and I will definitely try my best to get back to you and resolve any issues you might have.